because they're going to be giving closing arguments. So of course they're going to start with the prosecution, and then the defense is going to come out tomorrow. So, but let's talk about Diddy's prosecution's move could damage credibility with jury, according to an expert. Let's talk about that. But let's also talk about the charging conference that lasted forever on yesterday. It didn't get started until late. The wind is really, the wind is really blowing out here. Hold on, let me take these glasses off. Okay, so the wind is really blowing out here. I'm trying to hold this still, and I'm multitasking clearly. So anyway, they had the charging conference on yesterday. Now we kept getting delayed. It didn't end until about 7:30 last night. It was literally dark outside by the time people got out of there. Okay, so one of the things that some people found interesting was the fact that they're saying that the S trafficking was also forced labor. That's what the prosecution wanted to say. And but now we have experts, legal experts, saying that they're suggesting that the government's 11th hour move could damage credibility with jury. Okay, so, oh God, I'm gonna have to move down, you guys, because there's a lot of noise. I know you all can't hardly hear me, so just hold on for a second. Hold on, beloveds. Bear with me. It's really, really loud, okay? So anyway, with that all being said, I hope this is a little bit better. Okay, so they're saying that this move in the 11th hour could damage their credibility, the prosecution's that is, with the jurors. And I absolutely thought the same thing. Now they say lawyers on both sides of Sean Diddy Combs' trial hammered down instructions on Wednesday for the jury to begin deliberations once closing arguments wrap up in the former record executive's federal trial for S trafficking and racketeering. Now, they say prior to the charge conference, prosecutors indicated in court that they're not pursuing a number of allegations against Sean Diddy Combs. The updated request from the government, more than 7 weeks after the trial began, gave pause for concern about the status of the case. Now, criminal defense attorney Eric Faddis, founding partner of Colorado-based Varner Faddis, explained that the 11th hour changes in the charges might mislead the jury. And that's what I was thinking yesterday, because what do you all think about that? Because to the jurors, it may look like the prosecution has a weak case. May look like they may not feel that they have proven their case. So if they don't feel like they're confident in their case, what do you think the jurors are going to think? Okay, I want you all to pay attention. At the end of the day, with that all being said, who's been in New York with Diddy? I don't know. But anyway, with that all being said, they're thinking this may damage their credibility. Okay, now that's something to really think about. So anyway, they go on to say that in order to find Diddy guilty of a RICO, the jury have to find him guilty of at least 2 underlying crimes. And those are the predicate acts that I told you all about. 2 of those acts committed within a 10-year time span, okay? So they say this has to be in connection with the alleged criminal enterprise. Now, Faddis also told Fox News Digital that this move by the prosecution significantly limits the underlying crimes that the jury can consider in deciding if Mr. Combs is guilty of a RICO, thereby reducing the scope of the RICO charge and the case more generally. And all things considered, he says, I think that it makes it less likely that Diddy will be found guilty of a RICO. And that's what a lot of us are saying, because we're like, at this point, it's given hung jury or acquittal, okay? Because of that move that they did. And also, I mean, they waited till the last minute, and then you want to decide this is what you're going to do. So that's not looking good for them, in my opinion. It also does make it seem more likely that they have a weak case and that they're not even confident in their own case. Okay, that's just my opinion. Now, with that all being said, in a letter that was submitted to Judge Arvin Subramanian on Tuesday and obtained by Fox News Digital, the government indicated that it will not be pursuing theories of attempted kidnapping, attempted arson, and aiding and abetting S trafficking. Now, they're still going for the S trafficking, but they got rid of the aiding and abetting, okay, which is like a subcharge, okay? And also, they still have the arson as well, but not the attempted arson, okay? So please pay attention. So with that all being said, you know, this is going to get real tricky. We're in the last few days. There's a whole lot of crazy stuff going on. People are in their feelings. People are upset. People are mad. People are trying to fight in the line. People are getting upset because there's people trying to cut the line, for one, and then there's people like me who have paid to in fact cut the line, okay? They have people that have paid line sitters. As you all know, we've been doing that since the beginning. And so some people pay to get line sitters and other people don't understand how they're not able to get in. But listen, it's gonna get even more crazy next week because that's when the verdict is gonna come in, okay? So it's gonna be even worse. But the bottom line is, and there's been all kinds of arguments going on, all kinds of, just drama because people are in their feelings. People are getting upset about other people's opinions and all of that. It's getting real crazy. So with that all being said, listen, I'm not gonna stay here long, but I did want to give you all, hold on. Now, by the way, here's something that I thought was smart for the defense. So the prosecution starts their closing arguments today. Maureen Comey said that it's gonna last about 4 hours. They wanted the defense to immediately follow and start their closing arguments. However, they said respectfully, the defense doesn't want to do their closing arguments today. They said they don't care what time Maureen Comey ends her arguments. They want to do theirs tomorrow morning because they don't want people to be tired, okay? And that's a good strategy because listen, I don't want to be sitting in there 8 hours listening to people just go over and over all this evidence and summarize things we've already heard. We see how that's panned out when they kept showing the text messages over and over doing summary. And basically, a lot of people said it was a snooze fest, myself included. Okay, I told you guys like last week, some people started leaving out. So if we're tired, what do you think the jurors are? They're tired too. And when the jury's tired and frustrated, what do you think that they're thinking? So Mark Agnifilo said that he would, or the defense said they would prefer to do theirs tomorrow, which I think is absolutely good because I don't want to sit here all day. So even if Maureen Comey and the prosecutors, even if they wrap it up at 12 o'clock noon, that's when we're leaving. We're still not going to hear the defense until tomorrow. And I think that's the best way to do it also because we want to be able to process the information. We can't remember all of those things. We're going to be taking notes, but we can't get everything, in our notes. And at the end of the day, it's good to give people time to process the information, to process the evidence that they're reiterating, the talking points and all of that, and just go over things and probably even sleep on it. Okay, specifically the jurors. Because it doesn't matter what I think, what we think, the public, it's all about the jurors. So I think that was a smart strategy, and that was the best thing for them to do. But, that's just my opinion. Okay, so with that all being said, let's go back to what the legal experts say. Now, they say the simplified charges, hold on, let me go back and find my space. Okay, so in the letter that they gave to Judge Aaron Sumerian, I told you guys they got rid of the attempted arson, the aiding and abetting trafficking, and they say the government understands that the court's desire for streamlined instructions. They don't want to confuse the jurors, okay? They don't want to have them, basically worried about how they're supposed to, come to their decisions based on what they've heard if they don't thoroughly understand exactly what a RICO is, how you arrive at the summation that they have proven all of the things needed to establish that there was in fact a RICO conspiracy and all of that. Another thing that I found interesting was yesterday when they were talking about the forced labor and the trafficking being a part of the forced labor. Well, I think it was Shapiro who stood up and said that basically is for someone who was like brought to this country, trafficked here, who doesn't know the language, who's been forced to do things or whatever. That would not pertain to this case. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's basically what she was saying. But the prosecution was saying that the freak-offs, the S trafficking that was involved in that they're alleging was involved in that, they're saying that absolutely does lend credence to forced labor. Okay, so I just thought that was interesting. Now, with that all being said, they say specifically the government has removed instructions from the charge relating to the attempted kidnapping under both California and New York law, attempted arson under California law, and aiding and abetting trafficking. Now, the government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are no longer necessary. So they don't have to give them more complicated instructions. So it should be easier for them to be able to understand what's going on, okay? Now, they say the streamlined charges could help streamline the deliberations and cause the jury to focus on only the RICO crimes. Okay, because they don't need to be focusing on baby oil and Astroglide, is all I'm saying. Now, they say on the other hand, it could damage the government's credibility as they promised this jury at the beginning of the trial that they could prove the crimes that they're now dismissing. You see why that's going to make the jury feel like their case is weak? And if you don't have confidence in your own case, why should we? Okay, because they did promise they would be able to prove all of this at the beginning of the trial. That's what they said. Okay, so the jury might feel misled. See, he says, see, this is a partial surrender and view of the remaining allegations, or they may view the remaining allegations with even more skepticism. Well, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Now, former federal prosecutor Naima Ramani clarified that there are no charges being dropped in the Diddy case. These are just like sub-charges, basically, okay, related to the predicate crimes. Now, the prosecutor's letter, or the prosecution's letter to the court, says they are no longer pursuing the attempted, I don't know why they keep reiterating this, and the arson as the predicate acts for the racketeering, because all of that falls under the RICO conspiracy. Now, they can still argue that the completed kidnapping of Cassie Ventura and Capricorn Clark and the completed arson of Kid Cudi's vehicle are RICO acts. But here's the problem with that. They never proved that Diddy had anything to do with the arson that happened to Kid Cudi's car. Now, we might all feel like he did it, but again, I always tell you guys that the police say knowing something and proving it is two different things. They never proved there was arson, and in fact, they said something about female DNA being on there. So I don't even really think they should have charged that. That's just my opinion, because they can't prove it, okay? Now, the same applies to the S-trafficking counts. The government is arguing that Diddy S-trafficked the victims, not that he aided and abetted others to do so, okay? The prosecution is just simplifying the charges for the jury so they avoid confusion and complications. Now, this doesn't really change anything, and the legal arguments that they're going to make during the closing will remain the same, except for the part about them talking about Iran and how the Homeland Security investigators should be more concerned about the conflict that's going on in Iran than they are baby oil and Astroglide. Okay, so what do you all think? We're down to the wire. Do you all think that there's going to be a guilty verdict? Do you think it's going to be hung jury? What do you all think? Drop me a comment to let me know. Okay, I'll have to read them later. Now, criminal defense and civil rights attorney Dante Pointer of Oakland-based Lawyers for the People, LLC, believes that the prosecution is acknowledging that evidence presented didn't pass muster. Y'all heard that? Did y'all hear that? Let me say that again. He said that the prosecution is acknowledging that evidence presented didn't pass muster. Basically, they didn't believe in their own evidence. They don't believe that they've proven it. Okay, that's what he said. Now, prosecutors are conceding that they do not believe they have met their own burden of proof, okay, as it relates to proving that he attempted to commit arson or attempted to kidnap someone as predicate acts for the racketeering and aiding and abetting as trafficking. Says, nevertheless, the statement they provided to the court says they abandoned their predicate acts because they want to streamline the case for the jury. Now, if you believe that, then one can also be led to believe prosecutors think they have a better chance at proving up the other predicate acts that they presented to the jury during the trial, such as that Diddy engaged in forced labor, narcotics offenses, bribery, and the obstruction of justice to further the goals of his criminal enterprise, okay, to coerce and force the women into participating in freak-offs and Wild King nights. Now, with that all being said, the jury will have less evidence to mull over and less theories of liability to consider for determining whether Diddy and his co-conspirators their conduct meets the requisite evidentiary threshold for a criminal enterprise. Now remember, these are legal experts. So they said, keep in mind, using a RICO charge to prosecute a celebrity business mogul for alleged sexual misconduct is very uncommon. Okay, so with that all being said, y'all let me know what you think. Like I said, I'm about to go in here because it looks like the line's moving and people are already trying to fight. I literally had to ask one of the marshals to save my spots because people are getting so desperate, okay? Now, with that all being said, listen, y'all, I don't know what y'all are thinking, but I'm telling you, this is about to get real juicy today. I'm going to be taking a lot of notes during the closing arguments by the prosecution as well as the defense, okay? Whose will start tomorrow at 9 a.m. Today, court's starting at 10. And then here's the thing. When they said the defense wanted to do theirs tomorrow, Maureen Comey stood up and objected and basically said she thinks that they're just trying to get an extra day to prepare. I think they already prepared a while ago. At least they should have. I think that they actually do feel that they don't want people to be tired and weary, because specifically the jurors, not us, but they don't want the jurors to be tired and weary, because then you can't really focus. And also, they want to give them time to digest everything, process everything that's being presented and say it to them. And let's not forget, with all of the information with the charging conference that we had to sit through yesterday, the jury wasn't there, but the rest of us had to sit through it, and it was a whole lot, like 97 pages, of which I have the transcripts. Maybe I'll do a live later when I get home and read you all the transcripts. I'll put them up on the screen. But with that all being said, I'm not sure. So with that all being said, listen, guys, I love you all to life. Each one teach one. This is how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember to keep the Most High first in your lives. Peace.